Hi, this is Jennifer Rapacki, and today I'm going to show you how to use my Peekaboo fabric tool. I'm going to work with the 5-inch tool today, but the technique works the same for the 3-inch and the 10-inch. So you're going to start with your quilt fabric. I designed the 5-inch and the 10-inch tool to work with charm packs and layer cakes, or you can cut your own squares. So I have the top fabric and then what I call the Peekaboo fabric, cut 5-inch. Then you want an equal size square of Pellon's 830 pattern cloth. This is actually a polyester rayon blend. It's non-woven and it doesn't matter which side you use. I've also got some sharp pointed scissors. These are Karen K. Buckley's large size. I really like these because it cuts really well into the point, which we need. A glue stick. I like this sew line because it has a small tip, but a good old Staples acid-free glue stick works too. Some pins. And first what we're going to do is take our pattern fabric, and I find it's easier to mark if I'm on a hard surface. And I'm going to line up the tool. And the one other thing we need is a marking pen. I like this friction pen that goes away with the heat of the iron. So we're going to mark the inside edge of this leaf shape. So there we have the shape. We're going to take our top fabric, the one we're going to make the cutout in, and we're going to line up the marked pattern fabric on top. Now make sure that the right side of your fabric square is face up. Right side's up. Now if you're using batik, it doesn't matter because they're both the same side. I didn't get a good job of lining this up. We'll line these up. And then I put a couple pins in. There, that's better. And what I do for sewing is I start on the side here. It's a 1.5 millimeter stitch. A 50 weight thread is fine. I like Aurifil's 2-ply 50 weight also. I've also used 60 weight Wonderfill. They all work fine. I start in the middle. I sew into the point following along the line. Go all the way around to the other point and come back, and I just overlap. I don't do any back stitching here. So here's a piece where it's all been sewn. I used pink thread here just because you can see it better. Now what I'm going to do is I kind of fold it in half, and I take my sharp scissors and I make a little clip. And I'm doing this all the way over at the side because I can cut out this inner leaf shape and it will be useful, and I'll show you what you can do with that. So now I'm going to cut about 1/8 of an inch all the way around. It turns out when you trim this close to the edge, we don't have to do any clipping for this curve. So I get trimmed all the way around. And here you've got the matching leaf shape from the inside. I'm going to set these aside and show you what you can do with it later. Now at this point, what we need to do is clip right into that point, and you really need to get as close to the threads as you can without cutting that thread. That is part of the trick for getting this real sharp point. So I've cut right into that point. Now at this point, what I found works really well is to take the tip of the iron and kind of iron the edge of the pattern fabric to where you're going to be turning it on the inside. I tried this without doing it, and I get a much cleaner edge when I do this step ahead of time. Now I'm going to turn the pattern cloth to the wrong side. You got to kind of work it through. You get better at it the more of these you do. Get this all turned over. And what I'm going to do is, the trick for getting that point is I kind of hold the fabric here and I grab the pattern cloth here at the tip and I tug. And you can tug and you'll see the quilting fabric. Then you know you're ready to give it a little iron. And because I pre-ironed that pattern cloth, it's real easy to iron these edges so that you see a little of the quilting cloth and none of the pattern cloth will show through to the top side. And I kind of turn it around to get the other point. I'm going to get the fabric laid out, grab the pattern cloth and just give it a little tug till I see that quilting cloth. There we go. And then finish ironing this, pressing. And you can turn it over, and then I give it a really good press. And steam is okay. Now sometimes you get a little pucker here, and that's when some steam will help you take that out. And I've got it all nice and pressed. Now sometimes the pattern cloth shows beyond the top quilt cloth. And when I have that happen, I'll trim this back just a little bit. Because what we want to see is when we layer this cutout piece on top of the peekaboo fabric, our guide for sewing the blocks is going to be the peekaboo fabric underneath. And sometimes if a little of this pattern fabric is showing, it's hard to see the edge of the peekaboo fabric. So I'll just get this trimmed off. And then here's my peekaboo fabric. We're going to let that rabbit show through. One thing you can do with this is fussy cut your squares so you get what you want in the leaf shape. I'm going to kind of line up the cutout piece with the peekaboo fabric, and you kind of get it lined up as best you can. Now one thing that does happen is that you get a little distortion along the edges here where the points are, and that's okay because the peekaboo fabric is what's going to be your sewing guide. Now I usually take a few pins and pin. Usually I like to pin along the edge here. And at this point, what we can do is take a glue stick, and you can lift up this point and put a little of the glue on the pattern fabric so it sticks to the top fabric. And then you can lift up the two and get the peekaboo fabric and kind of glue that together. You're just kind of tacking them down. I find with a smaller project like a table runner, the mug rugs, that I can actually just pin the layers together and sew my blocks together. Do what's ever easiest. The glue helps too. The other thing I do is sometimes I will stitch the two layers together along this edge. I'll edge stitch kind of pretty close to the edge here. Do that before I sew the blocks together. Again, with a smaller project, I find I need to do that. But if I'm working with the 10-inch blocks and I made a queen size quilt top, I definitely stitched these edges, so I have the peekaboo fabric and the top cut out, sewed these edges together before I sewed the blocks. It just depends on how big of a project you're working with. And then at this point, you're ready to either do a little more gluing or pinning and start sewing your blocks together. Now, what can you do with that inside piece? So I've got my leaf left over, so you can layer them, put a couple pins in, again to hold it together. And then what I did is again with a 1.5 millimeter stitch, about 1/8 of an inch away, or this is a generous 1/8, I stitched all the way around, again overlapping my stitches. Now this is a way to do a clean edge applique, and what you do is you just pull this pattern fabric away from the quilt fabric, and you're just going to clip in there so that you can cut a slit in the back. Now you don't want to go too far, and then the other thing you need to do is you've got to trim these tips. So I'm going to trim into this, and I'm going to trim right across the tip. Same thing here, I'm going to trim across the tip and kind of trim away that extra fabric, or it'll be too bulky in here. And now at this point we're going to turn this, and I have one of these bamboo point turners I like, and you can get in there and turn this through. I'm going to poke your leaf through there. Take your sharp pointy object, whatever it is, and we're just gonna poke those leaf points out. And you can do this with about any shape. In this case, you already had the pattern cloth and the leaf shape made. Get that point out there. There we go. Get a pretty good point. And I like to take the edge of this bamboo point turner and just kind of run along the edge there. Gets it. Looks pretty good. Let's get rid of that excess, and then you can come in. Oh, you can see I got to poke that out a bit more. The other thing you can do is take a stiletto and just, you got to do it very gently, pull that point out. Sometimes it's easier to work it with the point turner. And for a leaf shape, it's okay if it's a little rounded. And then we're going to press it. A little steam. And I've got a leaf shape. Now I've had some of my students where they've taken the block and then used this in the middle. So there's all sorts of things you can do. And that's how you use the Peekaboo fabric tool.